Welcome back to PH.d TV, and today we'll be going over my top 5 fragrances for life. So in this list, I'll be going over the fragrances that I will always plan, at least do my best, to always have in my catalog of fragrances for my wearing. Because these fragrances, to me, work best with me. I feel like I use them the most. And that if I just had to flat out say, these are my signatures for depending on the time of year and just for what I use them for, these are gonna be them. So let's do it, let's get to know me a little bit. So if you've seen any of my videos, you knew this was gonna be on the list. You knew Jimmy Choo would be right here first, foremost in the front, because you know I consider this to be my signature scent. Whew, for good reason. Yeah, the projection may not be the world's best, but its longevity is fantastic, it smells great. My fiance's absolute favorite thing on me and any man. Well, you know, me, and I hope not any man, but you get the drift. But this, to me, is a class act of a fragrance. As I've said before, not to beef it up, because I know it's not the world's most popular fragrance in the world, but you know, it's not original. But that's not to say it's not good. It works incredible with me. It may not work best for everybody, but every fragrance works different with everyone's individual chemical. You know, our bodies work with the fragrance chemicals differently. What may not work for me may work for someone else, and what may not work for someone else may work for me. So first and foremost, Jimmy Choo Man. And as I said, Jimmy Choo Man probably is not the most original because I feel like it kind of takes off after number 2 choice here, which is the one and only Bleu de Chanel. Because honestly, this is just so good. And if I didn't say this is the Eau de Parfum edition of the fragrance, not the Parfum or the Eau de Toilette, but I do feel like this is probably going to be my most user-friendly, most mass-appealing fragrance there is in terms of anything in my collection. More than Jimmy, more than the Creed Aventus, you know, clone that you'll see later on in this list. And you've also seen in my past videos what this means to me, who it reminds me of, and what it makes me think a man should smell like. So with that being said, Bleu de Chanel's definitely on this list. And again, nothing's gonna be really in an order of things I will have for the rest of my life, or like, you know, my fragrances for life. Jimmy Choo's gonna be easily the number 1. The rest of these are gonna be kind of out of order, but Bleu de Chanel is next on the list. I will have this for life. And next up we have Calvin Klein Eternity Aqua. Now this one's easily gonna be the most synthetic on this list by a long shot. In fact, most people would probably say this is probably gonna be the most cheap designer fragrance that I have. And I don't mean cheap as in price or cheap as in the quality of the fragrance. I personally think it's great, but compared to a lot of designer fragrances, depending on the fragrance in the house, Calvin Klein gets a here and there flack, and I don't see why. I think it is fantastic. His fragrances just work well with me, and as I said, what works for others may not work for others, and what works for others may not work for me, but Calvin Klein fragrances definitely do. And when it comes down to aquatic scents, this is easily going to be my number 1 aquatic scent that I will have for life. In the summer, this is what I use the most. This is easily my easiest go-to. And honestly, I read somewhere in terms of, if you're trying to find a fragrance for somebody, close your eyes, smell the fragrance, and see if your brain's able to associate that smell with that person. My fiance, even though Jimmy is her man, she says this smells pretty much like me in the summer. So basically, next up on my fragrances for life, Calvin Klein Eternity Aqua. All right, and now we have the Creed Aventus clone ripoff, which is Club de Nuit Intense by Armaf. Now, I'm gonna say that out of all my fragrances, out of any of them, between Calvin Klein Eternity Aqua, you know, even from the other ones in my last reviews, which I will link up to some of them up here, my other reviews will be up here, like the Cremos. The Cremos, for some reason, last 8+ hours on me when I soak fragrances up pretty quick. Out of any of those, this is easily going to be the biggest monster out of my collection. In terms of projection, in terms of longevity, in terms of everything. The scent, come on, it's cloned after Creed Aventus. This is the biggest monster of any of my collection. I've had more compliments out of this fragrance alone in the last 2 to 3 months since I've had it than I've probably had with 2.5 years of wearing this, or ever wearing Bleu de Chanel. And that's just why I love it. It smells like the much more expensive fragrance that's Creed Aventus, and this is probably 1/10 of the price, if not a 1/12 of the price of what that cost. And it works beautifully. A lot of people who have had Aventus and has worn it has said that, you know, this lasts longer anyway. So why would I buy something that would last not as long as this, is 12 times the price of this? You get the gist. This is a fragrance to have for life. It's incredible. It's just a monster. That's the one word I'm gonna use for it. It's a monster. Now this one I'm probably gonna get a death punch to the throat because I just named off a lot of nice designer scents, and now I'm about to go to a more inexpensive designer scent. And that's going to be Curve by Claiborne. Now I know it's gonna be said here. You went from 50 to 100 to you know, late 40 fragrances in terms of money, you know, like, you know, price ranges to a $20 or sub $20 fragrance that you can find at rack stores. Listen, this is one of those nostalgic scents to me. I was born in 96. This came out in 1996. My buddies I grew up with, my best friend, one who's gonna be a groomsman of mine, wore this. Actually, I'm gonna say at one point or another, all my groomsmen probably wore this, and I knew I wore it at one point or another. This came out when I did. Oh, that's a graphic image. This came out the year that I was born, and I just grew up with it. This is on this list for nostalgic purposes, and even for being a, you know, probably the most user-friendly cheapie you could find in a rack store. Even people on YouTube who are big into fragrances have said this is probably gonna be the most classic in terms of cheapie and very, you know, easy-going fragrances you'll find in a rack store, 20 bucks. You're not gonna offend a single person. It's not a loud fragrance. It lasts a pretty good time for being an eau de cologne. Nostalgic to me, I love it. It makes me think of my childhood, makes me think of my buddies, makes me just think of a lot. And it makes me think of a lot of things I went and did to get to where I'm at today. So this is memories in a bottle for me, curved by Liz Claiborne. And now this last one, I know I went through 5. This is actually an honorable mention. So with this honorable mention, this is one that I love. It's fantastic. Once you see what it is, you'll just be like, duh. Like, why isn't that on your main list at all, actually? But the reason this wasn't on my main list was because it is considered to be one of the best, you know, finds in a rack store, especially for the quality of the fragrance and especially for the price you can get it at. And that's gonna be Davidoff Cool Water. Now, I know that this has a lot behind it. It's had years, since the 80s. Just, it's a monumental fragrance, one of the best cheap finds you can find in a rack store. One of the best, you know, longevities, you know, sillages and projections, and just, it's just so good. It's just, the reason it wasn't on here was because I already have a Bleu fragrance in my arsenal of my catalog of my top 5 fragrances for life. And I think these are very good. These are the best summer fragrances in my opinion. That would work for anybody anyway. I think Eternity Aqua would smell incredible on everybody. I also feel like Davidoff Cool Water would smell great on anybody. But ultimately, those are 2 Bleu colognes that work well on me. I do feel like, you know, Calvin Klein Eternity Aqua did dethrone it to put it in an honorable mention. That's not to say it's not good. It's an honorable mention for my for my 5 fragrances for life. So that means it's not gonna be on the other lists that will follow this video. The honorable mention, Davidoff Cool Water. And that's my list. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like this list, I will also link up other playlists and things like that up above if you'd like to see my other lists on fragrances or things like that, even reviews. Feel free to check them out now or check them out later. But regardless, take care of yourself out there in the world with the way it is. Make sure to like this and subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time.